How great would it be to get up close and personal with the beauty industry heroes we love and admire, and to ask them, how did you learn to do what you do? I'm Chris Baran, a hairstylist and educator for 40 plus years, and I'm inviting all our heroes to chat and share the secrets of their success. This week's guest and I, we share a similar mission, and that is to help our industry grow and become successful. And that's what I love about this gentleman. He's a fourth generation hairdresser. He is the founder of Hair Club Live and How to Cut It, which, by the way, is UK and Ireland's #1. It's the original hair industry podcast, and that's been going since 2017. He has been a guest on our Chris Camp digital seminars before. That's where I got a chance to meet him in person. Been just intriguing gentleman, and that is Mr. Dom Lehane. So let's get into this week's head case. Mr. Lehane, the weirdest thing for all the people listening and watching right now, I feel I've had so many conversations. I know you like a friend, and yet we've never met face to face. Everything that we've done, like through Chris Camp and all that, has always been like this digitally. But quite frankly, that is your domain. That's where you're the first one out there that started podcasting for hair. And I want to get into that later, but I always think that people always want to know your background, where you came from. And so hairdressing, how did that fit into the equation? Did you want to be a hairdresser? What that's always the first thing that everybody wants to know.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you, Chris, for inviting me onto your podcast. A true honor, honestly. Wow. Absolute fan of everything that you do. So to be sat here this side is a true honor. Look, I think people quite often will say to me that they just think that I sit in this chair behind a mic and we do all that stuff, and no connection to hairdressing whatsoever. But yeah, absolutely. Started out. Well, first up, I'm a fourth generation in our family. So my dear great nan was probably the most successful of us all. She, back in the 30s, 40s, had a string of salons in London. My nan, mum, myself came into the industry in 1986, at the age of 16. Again, I was surrounded by the industry because of my mum having what I would say, Chris, was a very local salon with hood dryers, shampoos and sets.
I had the same thing. That's my background. Blue and pink frock wallpaper.
You know it, absolutely. There was nothing glamorous whatsoever what I saw of the hair industry. And if I'm being completely honest, I people I'm sure may have said to yourself and probably many of our listeners, is a common question. Have you always wanted to be a hairdresser? Yeah. And that question was absolutely no. I had very little interest in the industry, but I think what took my attention was going to here in the UK, Salon International. Yeah. And that really just opened my eyes to what the industry could offer. And I think from that moment on, I think I was more suddenly gripped by these platform artists and educators and products, which I never ever knew, rather than the old ladies sat under the hood dryers. Yeah. So that was it. I went into the industry in 1986. I started out at Trevor Sorbie, Covent Garden. I had the pleasure to be, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that was just purely because at that time, Trevor Sorbie was on TV. He was British Hairdresser of the Year. I thought, well, hey, let's write a letter because as we know, that's what it was. And I started my career there. I was delighted to say that I was a trainee for Eugene Solomon, now the famous session stylist.
Interesting tidbit.
Absolutely. And to be fair, what a cool guy he was. And, being able to see him in his early days as a hairdresser was truly inspirational. I was blown away by him. But, fast track sort of a year later, I think London just felt a little bit too big for me. I've got to be honest. I think homesickness sort of kicked in, came back to my hometown. So basically, I'm based in rural sort of middle England, if you want to call it that. And I kind of went on and learned my craft. I then worked for a series of brands, done some field educating, opened my own salon in 1993, grew that to around about 15 staff. And then I think this was around about 2000, and I'm getting my dates right here. This would have been around about 2009. I knew I wanted to take a new direction. But along the way, we'd also opened up a men's grooming salon, if you want to call it that. This was before the popularity of the barber business that we saw, late 90s. Sadly, that didn't work out.
I want to back up a second there, because for those of us that are listening that are the youth, they don't have the gray hair like I do,
or the no hair like me.
Yeah. But there was a really interesting time, because for a while, like quite a long time back, barbering was huge, and then hairdressing hit, and barbering kind of went away, and it was. And let me phrase that for the barbers out there. I respect you, and it's not that it ever went away, but it kind of got the clientele, the customers, I guess, kind of shifted over, and a lot of hairdressers were doing more of the hair, because it wasn't fades and it wasn't clippers. It was all about razors, scissors, etc. And it was that time when all of a sudden hair was getting longer for men, and then men's popularity in salons came up, and they started to take away and become a little more masculine. And then all of a sudden barbershops came back huge, and they are huge now. But there was that era in there where it wasn't really the thing that you might think of opening. So I want to go back to that. That was a fairly risky endeavor, going into men's hair and opening up something specifically for men's. Now, what made that work?
Do you know what? It's a really interesting point, and I talk about men's the rise of the barbering industry, or men in general with hair and taking care of their looks and their appearances. There was, as you remember, probably Chris, like myself, barbering did go very backstreet. There was that period where we had the new romantic sort of era, and everything was very sort of, the guys were going into unisex salons, and that it wasn't deemed to be cool to be going to barbershops. But then we saw in the 90s, certainly again here in the UK, and I'm sure in America too, the lad mags were becoming very popular, that mid 90s. Then we saw the explosion of people like Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, David Beckham, that sort of men went front cover, and suddenly we were in this period of grooming for men. We saw those magazines, FHM, GQ, became really popular. Yeah. And we just saw that interest in men's grooming, and certainly with shaving, and, it wasn't the beard era. This was,
that was before
late
the
90s.
Metrosexual and.
Correct. And, tats were still probably on the shoulders, and that was as, daring as we got with tattoos. Yeah. But we opened it because we could see that there was a shift that was happening. And, look, we got it wrong. I think the concept was amazing. The space was amazing. We got great interest because it was new. This wasn't anything that was being done particularly, but we were just too soon to the market. And if I'm honest, we got our numbers wrong. You always can't, and probably coming from a successful unisex salon, we knew that side well, but going into the men's, it was new for us, and I think we got numbers wrong. We kitted it out beautifully. It was well under furniture. It was absolutely beautiful, but it just couldn't sustain the quieter days that we had, so I think probably lessons there were, we always said, I think I kind of just wished that we maybe went small rather than going big and glam, and but hey, that's the lessons that we learn along our journey.
Bingo. And I want to circle back to that, because for people that are listening, firstly, thank you for being so candid. Number one. Number two is that, the only people that are the people that are successful have failed at things many, many times, but they've always learned something from it. And that's what I think is so critical in what you said, Dom, was that, here's what we learned. Here's the lesson we got out of that. And whether you apply that to doing it again or into a new salon or whatever you're doing, to me, that's critical. It's not about taking the failure as a failure. It's taking the failure. Yeah, good. That's something I'll either do that again differently, or I won't do that. But here's the lessons I'm going to learn to applying it forward. That to me is huge.
No, look, absolutely. And I don't think I'm always going to be somebody that wants to try and do stuff differently. If I'm being completely honest, Chris, I don't sit here trying trying to sound like I'm, some trend looking guy who's all over the latest trends, but I consider myself a futurist. And by that is I'm interested about the future. I'm interested about new. I want to do things that are different. And sometimes you could be too soon. And I'm not a great follower, and I never have been. Even my football team, you will clearly know, or soccer team, whatever you call. I'm not a follower. I tend to, I want to be a little bit pirate.
Fans, who is your team then?
So it's West Ham, which East London. We now play at the what was the Olympic Stadium, Premier League, but we're bang average. But that's kind of how we are. So I'm generally not a follower, and as I say, that's probably my character throughout whatever I do. I would never ever follow anybody. That's for sure. I like to try and do stuff different, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I think that there's always, I always say there's two kinds of people. That there's ones that want to do everything differently, and there's other people that just want to follow a trend, and all of it's good. But it's generally the risk taking that happens in there. And to me, like there's this, a banking term that says risk equals yield. And, if you don't take any risk, there's really no yield involved. And if they're going to do a breakthrough or find something, you got to take a chance, do it a little bit differently. Correct. And one thing that I kind of hope for the youth of today is that some out there are going to say, hey, look here's something that's going on. Let's shift it 100%. What would happen if we did it 180 degrees from that? And I think that's where interesting thoughts come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I actually hosted an event here in the UK, and there were some amazing speakers, and the ones that were always, it was about being pirate. And I think we're seeing that now, I think, is being pirate. Don't be frightened to just do things a little bit dangerous, a little bit more, maybe, what not everyone is doing. I think that's where we're in a very crowded place right now, for sure. And, you can be very Magnolia and just be safe, paint the walls safe, or you be a little bit more out there and be bold and be dangerous in what you do in a good way. But I think that's, we need that rock and roll right now. For me, that's what excites me.
Yeah. One of my teachers always said that, if anything you do, you can do anything you want to do as long as it's legal, moral, and honest in what you do. And that's sometimes what you got to do is say, look, I'm not hurting anybody when I do this. It's everything is still kosher when I'm doing this, but I'm just going to really flip this upside down and try something different. And to me, that therein is where creativity lies. So if you can think about stuff like that, that's where truly the next gen of what I call the rising people, the people that are forward thinking, are really going to come to. Those are the people that people are looking at right now. So for all of you people listening and watching right now, just, and if you're sitting in a safe space and you're comfortable, great, but just try something just a little bit different, if anything, for the thing. To me, Dom, I call it, when I was behind the chair all the time, I knew that I had to do length and layers. It was just a given. That's where you made your money. But I always called them my zing. I wanted to have at least one or two zings for the day. The one where the client would come in, you'd suggest something. You could go, maybe it's not, you're not taking somebody from shoulder length there into a mohawk, but you're cutting them into something different, and they're truly astounded and they love it. And that's what I call my zing. And I think you have to have those a day. And the only way you get them is taking a risk.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for any hair professional, that's big moments. I think to have those zing moments, as you nicely call them, are great. Quite often we'll go through our day, and I always call it very menu kind of work, as lots of hair professionals. But I think you get that real fulfillment if you have those zing moments, whether twice in a week or whatever, but you just know that zing moment. You do a haircut and you just think, that's why I came into doing what I'm doing. And that's like anything what we do, isn't it? Through creativity, and most of us are creative thinking people, and we need that to keep it fresh, enjoyable. Okay.
So now, we kind of went through the hair part. Now just, if you didn't get it in the opening, I want to remind people again that Dom really was the first hair podcast. And I'm trying to imagine you, Dom, I'm trying to imagine you sitting around either cutting hair or sitting after, maybe going down to the pub and having a beer and say, what could I do that would really shake up, give me difference? What would I do? Something that would scare the hell out of me. And you went, podcasting. And when it hadn't been done, nobody was doing it. I mean, it had been done in the outside world, but not within our industry. What was the prompt, and what was that moment that you said, this is something I'm going to do? And just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. It's a question I like to answer, because did I ever see myself down at doing podcasting? Was absolutely no. I mean, I was aware of podcasts quite early on in the early days of podcasting, but in truth, I didn't really start tuning into them until about 2014. Actually, was when I first connected with podcasting. It was an American guy, Pat Flynn. He does a Smart Passive Income, and I was doing something here in the UK called Hair Club Live. We were doing open chair night, and I wanted an add-on that was going to be part of this. And I was listening to podcasts, and he was regularly talking about it. And I've always liked conversation. I think there's so much to be said. It's so powerful, certainly in a podcast, because I don't think you get any closer or more connected to people than actually stuff going straight into these things that we're all listening on right now. And that deeper connection for me just blew me away. And I remember sitting there and actually it was with a beer, surprisingly. And, we were on holiday in the Greek islands, and there I was, a bit bored of music, and I was listening to podcasts. I was just hooked in all holiday, and that was really the moment I thought, you know what, I want to do something here.
Yeah.
And I looked into it and self-taught myself. It was as simple as, there was none of this like what we're recording in right now, Chris. And, this was really early stuff. It was a Skype call. I had a really poor mixing board, but I followed the guys, and those podcasts are still available which I launched in 2017. And I learned my way and kind of winged it. I listened to some of it, as we all do, if anything gone by. And people say, oh, you'll hate what you hear. And actually, I don't particularly hate those. I'm still quite proud of them. The sound quality at times is a bit hit and miss, but you know what? It was the best thing I done. And for me, it was all about my passion for the industry and how to cut it in the hairdressing industry. How to cut it was all about people finding their career pathway. And that still to this day was what it was all about. And I kind of picture myself as that 17-year-old lad in a shoe town here in the UK, thinking I want to be connected to what's going on out there. And that's what I wanted to bring in the podcast, by bringing on interesting, amazing people and hearing their stories. And that was kind of where I wanted to go. And there was no goal at this start, Chris. It was purely, let's do this and let's see where it goes. And consistently, weekly, for 6 years now, we've been doing that. And that was the journey into podcasting.
I just have
no
to look
great
back
expense.
at my notes here for a second, because I've got this written down here. Somewhere. In 2021, forgive me if I've got this wrong, but in my research, in 2021, you had 100 inspirational guests.
Yes.
How the hell did you do that? And how many do you a day? I mean, I can tell everybody from my own, if anybody has ever had to rebook a guest in the salon for hair, and knowing how busy everybody is nowadays, I mean, we even had to we had some technical issues, so we had to rebook this one. So I'm curious, like, how the hell did you do 100 podcasts? 100. And how many do you book a day, and how does that work? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, actually, so probably in 21. So we've done I think that was our 100th episode. So we've now done, so today I probably like yourself, I record a batch recording a little bit before, I was actually doing an interview earlier today. But I think currently as we speak, what are we, February 2023, we are on around about 273 episodes, plus there's been other bits in there. So look, how have I done that? It's just easy. It's committed. You've got to be consistent. And whether this is, you're standing behind a chair, an educator, or whatever pathway you got, whatever you want to do with your social media as well, it's consistency. And actually doing one podcast episode, that's only a small bit of that. Yeah. This is, I don't have this team behind me. This is me sourcing guests, sourcing, every element is me along the way. And that social media post. So it's been commitment. It's been time. Love it to this day, but it isn't always easy. Yeah. If anybody says or thinks, hey, you sit there and talk behind a microphone and away you go, and suddenly all the deals and you're going to become ultra famous. Well, hey, get a life. It's so not, but it's easy because the people are wonderful. I like conversation, and that's the hair professional in me, Chris, that
because you still
talking to people. I like talking to people.
Not just this all day.
I'm now, look, I mean, I'll probably share a little bit further in, but there's big things happening for How to Cut It right now as we speak anyway. So, yes, I have a small, village location salon, where I literally just work on a very small select, clients, which is now just 1 day a week. So yes, I still do hairdressing, and I like doing hairdressing still because I like that connection it gives me. But yeah, we are pretty much now working with brands on projects and everything else that goes with what we're doing. And let's say we've got the next big phase coming for How to Cut It.
Yeah. Just with the guests here, with anybody listening or watching right now, I just want you to write that down. How to Cut It. And that's the name of the podcast. So, I remember, there was a while back when COVID was hitting us hard and strong, and we weren't allowed to be around people. And we have a couple members of our family who are very highly susceptible, and so we really couldn't be around other people than our immediate bubble. So we rented a houseboat, and we went out on this houseboat journey, and that was the time. I can't remember where I got it from, but I think that was all of a sudden. I know that you were talking to people about COVID and what people they were doing in their salons. And that was one of the first times that I really got turned on to How to Cut It. So I want to make sure that everybody that's out there is really tuning in to that podcast as well. Because I think there's enough room for everybody, and there's always the great information.
Look, it's great. There's a lot of great podcasts out there, and we're seeing more and more like yourself come along, Chris, and it's great to have people like you. Which reminds me, you must be coming onto my podcast. I think we were meaning to get this set up, so we're going to have to reverse that back at some point.
If I've got to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do it, as long
you're going to have to do that.
Absolutely, I have tea and bags. I'll have toothpicks underneath my eyes.
Would love to bring you on.
I would love that.
But yeah, look, there's space there for everybody. Podcasting is huge for me, and actually that's a big part of what we're doing. So we're now working on Sophia Hilton's podcast. So she's launched a podcast recently. So we're taking on production elements of that as well. So that's very much of what we're doing going forward, because whether it's me speaking or it's other people speaking, I think it's about, again, trying to put a different spin on different things again. That's probably where I'm at now, but there's some great podcasts out there, so none of us should ever be bored or not being inspired by these voices that are coming in. Everybody's got a different spin on things and a different way of interviewing.
And I think it's just learn from other people's mistakes. And you can only do that when you get in their conversations and find out like we talk about on here. So
sure.
I just want to jump into as a podcaster. You're talking to some of the, you have access to some of the most famous English, and I'm saying that was probably the wrong order, most famous hairdressers that happen to be English, because you're in their locale and they know you and you're the number one on there. You must get some, and I know you can't really say, here's my favorite one that I did, but what were was there some of the podcasts with some people that really surprised you?
Yeah, there was definitely some people that surprised me, and I have to think back. And then sometimes you think back, you think, "Oh, I didn't mention them. That was just a great interview." Yes, we brought on quite a lot of guests from America as well. And Trude, I'm not just saying this because I'm sat here talking to sort of yourself and probably North American listeners that are listening in, but I'm very excited by what I see in America right now, hairdressing. I think it's an exciting time, and certainly I'd love to chat to more of them. But in terms of sort of being here British based, actually it was an Irish hairdresser who surprised me most, and that was Noel Colgan.
Oh.
Now, Noel may not be the most famous hairdresser, but certainly during lockdown, he made a big march for himself. But it's actually Noel came onto the podcast, and like all great Irish people, Chris, they're great at telling a story.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they tell a story like no one else. And Noel came on. He'd been in touch with me before. He said, look, I'd like to come onto the podcast, and I'd like to talk about my battles and, you know, all the various things that he talked about. And a big part of that was his battles was building a very big salon and ego getting in the way.
Wow.
But he was battling alcohol, drugs, and a suicide attempt. And I actually sat there for, I think it must have been about an hour and 25, hour and a half. I don't know. But, and it was the least that I've ever said or asked in a podcast, because I just sat there and just listened to his story. So, I would highly recommend any of your listeners get a chance to check out that podcast with Noel, because it is a gripping story
for them as well.
So that's Noel. So that's NIALLCOLGAN. So if you put in Noel Colgan, I think in the your apps or your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I think it'll find that. But it's a great listen, and it blew people away. But there's also, I think I'm getting more excited right now, because I think what we've got is this this new breakthrough generation that are coming through, and I'm really enjoying listening to their take on the industry and how they're doing things very, very differently. And it sometimes, you know, to an older guard can be a little bit threatening.
Yeah, give us some
and we're hearing that.
Some examples.
Well, I think sometimes I see a lot on social media from very successful salons and salon names that have been in the industry for a long time, who I greatly admire. But there tends to be quite a negativity towards Gen Z, if you want to call it that. And my only way, not because it's like anything, if you feel threatened sometimes by a new guard that's coming along and doing things their way, whether we like that or not, they're doing it their way.
We did
their
it too,
way on
didn't we?
social, their way on TikTok.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I love that. And I was saying this to somebody earlier that, you know, for me, I think we've got a generation, maybe we've got to be careful that we don't become those Rolling Stones fans or those fans of 1980s new romantics saying it's not like how it used to be.
Yeah.
Because there is a danger our industry is sounding a bit like that now, because it's shifting and it's finding its new direction. And, you know, I admire some of the greatest names in our industry, you know, names like Sassoon, Sorby, Robert Labetta, great. But it's a different time now.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can't lose that heritage, but we have to kind of understand that things are moving on differently, and they are showing us how it's done. And they are actually in our industry right now, marketing our industry in ways that we haven't been able to market our industry for a long time, because there is a generation of people outside that are looking in on these reels that are gaining huge traction and views, that maybe what TV was doing when, you know, in those 90s, we had the rise of the superstar hairdressers, and, times are different, but it's exciting. And, I guess what I'm saying is I get more excited, I think, sometimes by finding the more names that aren't the obvious. Again, it goes back to that person, that guy who doesn't want to do always, you know, what everybody else is doing. So for me, it's trying to find guests that I feel a little bit more off the radar, but they're exciting. We need to look out for them.
Yeah. Do you think that part of that culture that we have now is clients, at least, and I'm going to throw a question at you, that do you think that those people that we just talked about that are gaining popularity, it's because the clients where they used to go for an advert, or it was word of mouth, or it was whatever that would get them into the salon. What's attracting them now is the social media, and what's attracting them is they're researching people by looking at what they're doing, and they're picking the hairdresser as opposed to word of mouth and so on. What credibility would is that a credible statement, you think, or?
Yeah, I think it's a very, honest statement. Look, social media, whether we like it or not, has played a huge part in people's careers. And when we talk about the booth rental salon, or what we call here the rent-a-chair, or the freelancer, the rise of the independent stylist, that has become possible because social media has allowed that to be possible. You can create your brand, who you want to be, in a platform that is free, easy to set up, and can reach a big audience. So therefore, social media has done that really well. It's changing, and algorithms are changing. So it's not always going to be easy. Eventually they're going to want more paid models here. And while I'm on this with social media, you've got to be careful, because you don't own nothing. Listeners, you do not own zero. And I should know about the effects of what recently I lost my own personal Instagram account. Boom, gone. No warning, no nothing. And I'll tell you what happened here. And I want this to be really important for listeners because we put everything into that. You have a great following on your social. Yeah. All it takes is one hacker through a data leak to get into your Facebook. So basically that's what happened in the start of the new year. My Facebook went under attack. Literally, I have a 2-step verification code. I have everything set up correctly. All day long, it was coming under somewhere in Asia. Boom, boom, boom. Someone was getting it. Eventually, they got in to my account during the early hours. They posted images of terrorists, horrendous atrocities. Facebook closed my Facebook account down, which is obviously Meta owned, which is LinkedIn. Sorry if I'm gone a bit off piece, but I think it's really important for people to know, because we're so invested in our social media. And anyway, it all seemed to get recovered. Facebook was okay. I was on Instagram, and then last week, I went on. I had a voice note going on between somebody, and then I went back on. We've closed down your Instagram account. It's gone. Disappeared. And look, it was okay. My person, I have how to cut it, and okay, I can rebuild that up. But what I think is, it's a warning that, look, we rely on social media. And actually there were people within our community who I reached out to, and we spoke to them about this. And there were many hair salons that had this done themselves, and someone had her salon business closed down through no fault of her own. And it's becoming more and more common. So make sure you are really set up right, and be careful, because I think, this social media, putting ourselves out there, our hair work, great. But what's going to happen if you lose that? Yeah. Make sure you have data. Yeah. You have a great website, because you own those. Yeah, exactly. Well, that is really, really good advice. So let's go. I want to go back to some of the guests you visited. Is that okay? I mean, you must have heard I want to ask you this, because I know what I'm like with this, and I took this one test that rates you as what kind of a dog you are when it comes to sales, and I'm half pit bull and I'm half retriever, because I want people to like me, but when I want something, I'll grab onto your ankle and I won't let go. But I know that my retriever side has also got this side where I'd want to ask somebody something or come on, but I'm so afraid that they'll say no that, I just won't ask. Does that ever happen to you? Do you get that? Do you just put it out there? How do you deal with that? So for me, asking is, it's really strange in how I ask people. And certainly in the early days, it was a lot easier because there wasn't such I call it the cabaret circuit, or the chat show circuit. There's a lot of people doing the chat show circuit now, an interview. So in the early days, there weren't many people getting asked to do a podcast. if truth, they probably didn't know what a podcast was. So then, I found it very easy. I had a good contact list through already stuff that we were doing here in the UK. So there were some very credible names that we got up and running with very early on. People like Anthony Muscolo, Trevor Sorby, Tom Connell, great names that would, and I think that just gave that credibility very early on. I think if I started right now, it'd be a lot more challenging because it'd be kind of like, well, hey, who are you? What are you doing? So it was reaching out with an email or through contacts, through a phone call.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I get a lot of people now get in touch, which is hugely complimentary. And it can be, it can be an email. I like to do things in a nice sort of way. I like to do it for an email, but hey, Instagram's a great place to do stuff. And I'm very much a voice note kind of guy. I like to drop in with a voice note, and ask people. I find the American guests are more challenging to bring onto the show because I think we're outside of America, and sometimes that can seem a little bit small fry, I think, maybe to certainly the superstar of the American guest.
I'm not going to say I disagree, but what I think is, because quite frankly, I'm dealing with a lot of North America, and I just find everybody here is, number one, everybody's overworked. Number two, everybody's got their book and they're going crazy in what they're doing, their calendar. And then number three is everything gets buried in an email. And I found that like what we have to do is sometimes we'll have to, reach out like 10 or 15 times in order to get somebody and actually to get their email, to get them onto a list where we can put them in. These are people we don't have a date yet. I just think that people are so overwhelmed.
And I get that completely. I think that there's just that part of me. I'm not very good at keep going back and back to people because I don't want to feel a nuisance.
Yeah.
Actually, that is probably my biggest fault. So I will reach out a couple of times, maybe 3 times. And I think, okay, if we're not getting anywhere now on the third, maybe it's just not right for them at this. I don't take it personally because I understand it. We are busy. We can miss things. It's trying to keep up on a very, very busy time. And for a lot of people as well, I almost think it's a bit like, why would somebody go on a chat show? They want something, I think, for a lot of people. I think, whether it's selling a course or a book so I find that that's a good time to get in touch with people, if they've got something going on, because they're going to want to shout out about that. Yeah. But equally, it brings me back. So yes, reaching out has always been, something we do. I mean, I'm kind of planning for July in terms of guests, and that's on a weekly show. So we don't struggle in it. It's just trying to make sure that we have a real variation of guests that are going to bring something different to the podcast.
As a podcaster, and listening, helping people with their stories and so on, there's always this thing, because I know that every hairdresser that's out there right now has some sort of what they call in some form an imposter syndrome. Will they really find out that I really don't know what I'm doing, even though they do? You can be an expert and still have that. When you're interviewing those people, does that ever come up? Do they talk about their feelings of, just, God, my imposter syndrome or whatever? Does that ever come up?
It's a word I hear regularly. I don't think there's very few people that don't have an imposter syndrome. I mean, not so long back, it was just lacking in confidence, but now imposter syndrome is a more sort of way of explaining how we feel. I think everybody has that. I think if you don't have, if you're so overconfident in everything that you do, then it's going to start to become arrogant. Yeah. It's nice to have an imposter syndrome. I think it's nice for people to, be a little bit unsure about yourself. Look, I do a lot of hosting work here in the UK, and every time I get on that stage, there's that part of me, Chris, that I'm like, am I okay for this? And you have all those thoughts. Why they book me for? Why? There's all these people out there, and they've booked me to host this. So of course, imposter syndrome comes in, but that's nice. Yeah. It's a nice thing. Shyness is a nice thing. It's not saying we should be uncomfortable Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. I don't want everybody being, hey, I find that almost off-putting. I quite like the little bit of vulnerability in people. Yeah. That's a really nice thing. And some of these coaches, not referring in the industry, but they're...
Sorry, I stepped on you. Go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Chris. Sorry. No, what I was just going to say is that we find there's so many coaches out there now, podcasters, and not in just the hair sphere. This is in all areas. And sometimes they're just too confident. They're too slick, telling us how we should be. And no wonder there's imposter syndrome if they're all telling us this is what we should be doing. Well, come on, we it's a different vibe for a lot of people, but it's a nice thing to have that little bit of imposter syndrome about yourself.
And I think that the more that we can show that vulnerability, and whether it's in a story we tell and experiences that we've had of failure in the past, it's just the easier it is for everybody else that is just starting to go, okay, something I got to go through. And so as long as I learn from it and I come to the other side, I'm good. Yeah.
But here's the thing though, isn't it, Chris, is that we are in a world that a lot of us, like you go into the industry as a hair professional and you learn your trade. Who was going to prepare us to do podcasts and do Instagram lives and do everything that now is presented with us? No wonder we've got an industry of people feeling imposter syndrome because we're doing stuff that we're not maybe necessarily comfortable with. We didn't get that training in our college days or our beauty school. Yeah. We are having to sort of learn as we go in whatever way. So it's a good thing, but I'm not surprised we've all got a lot of this imposter syndrome.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I remember I was doing a program the other day and I was telling somebody, they were talking about the reactions because it was on Train the Trainer. How do you get on stage and et cetera? And he said, well, what's it like? Is there a place where you just feel fully confident before you step on stage? And I said, look, I'm always a nervous wreck before I go on stage. And if I haven't had one or two nervous poops beforehand.
Absolutely. Leave me for a quiet 5 minutes. Look, I hosted a big event for Matrix, back in last year and just done a big event for Weller. Yeah. And honestly, people were shaking my hand. Well, they must have thought, God, that guy's got the most clammiest hands known to anybody but that's just because the nerves. And I know you and Chris, you do, Train the Trainer, brilliant stuff. I think it's so good. But you will both have that as many times as you do it. You'll probably have those little apprehensions even when you're doing an interview, when you're doing a Facebook Live, an Instagram Live, because it's just doing something we're not doing all the time. And that's good. We get that as hair professionals, don't we? Oh my God, I've got that new client and what are they going to think of me? I always say that new client moment is like a moment that you're going out on a first date. Yeah. They want to know everything about you. How long you've been doing hairdressing for. It's all kind of nerves that sort of run through us in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. So I want to swing this back a little bit too, because we're talking about how to cut it. But you've got other endeavors that you've got going on. Like I was listening to you that I know you're starting the production company, and but you also have your program. Just trying to look at where on the note that I put on this here. I know your Hair Club Live. Your Hair Club Live is okay. Hair Club Live still going? And what was the premise of it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thank you for asking that, because this is a good one. So Hair Club Live is something that we created 2000, I have to get my years, around about 2007. Basically, the idea of Hair Club Live, the initial thing was where I wanted to, I was doing some club promoting, for me, I was doing some house music nights, and I kind of looked at this and I was thinking, I like bringing people to an event. Yeah. That's just the kind of guy I am. And I kind of thought, what is stopping me from actually just putting on my own hair events? Hence Hair Club Live. I wanted that club mentality, hairdressers in a live format. And we launched that in my hometown at the time, Lee Stafford. This was 2008. Yeah, 2008. We packed out a theatre. I mean, it was a sellout. It was amazing. We then promoted more hair events within the region. And then eventually I wanted to build a community. Again, this was before communities were becoming communities, and we built it on something called Ning, a platform called Ning. And, this was before Mighty Networks, which I believe Hairbrained is now built on. So we were doing something on Ning, and the idea was I wanted this community, and again, this is before Facebook groups, and that's what it was, to bring people together. And then that launched us doing live events, and we got inspiration from Open Chair from America. Yeah. I'd seen, I think it was Scissor Candy that were doing Open Chair, and we brought Open Chair Night to the UK. We launched it, and it was honestly game changer, absolutely brilliant. We kind of winged it. So the idea was get in a pub, 10 minutes on stage. I'd say traffic lights, but we didn't even have traffic lights at the start. And I kind of found myself hosting this, and I was like the oldest MC that you can. I was bringing commentary to live performance in hair, and standing by the stage, and it all got really tribal. People, boom, boom, it was amazing. And we took it on tour a few times. And in the end, probably just before the pandemic, I was ready to move in new areas and new directions. And I felt that probably How to Cut It and Hair Club Live didn't quite align for me, and maybe the vision. So we came away from Hair Club Live, but it's still there. It's still run by Nikki Pope and Mike Vincent, who run Tribute Magazine and Colour World here in the UK. So Nikki still runs that. So I was in business with them. But yeah, look, we just decided time to move in new directions. And I think that's probably, I have so much bubbling in my head, Chris, that I need sometimes to just set free and do it again. And I like that creating. Yeah. It comes back to it. So Hair Club Live's still there. It's still a great platform. But we are going on our new direction now.
You just said that, with this, I'm not sure if other people have that like you, and I've always got something going on in my brain where, what about this? What about this? It's sometimes at the compliment where I don't even finish what I just started, where I've got a new idea going on. But what's it like? How is that, all of this and the time, et cetera? Do you still have what do you do for downtime? What do you do for, getting your charge back? I always call it recharging your life force particles.
Recharging. Yeah, you know what? I'd like to say I do think amazingly exotic or outrageous or high octane stuff. I'd be lying. I don't. For me, it sounds very cliche, but I love outside. I love walking. I'm a creative. I can't stop thinking. Yeah. That is, it drives me insane. I want to, because it tires my head out. Yeah. I'm always thinking. But it's what Tom Connell once said to me, who's now a creative director with Davines. And Tom Connell said to me, he says, you've got to be obsessed. And I don't think I would guarantee you're obsessed about what you do, Chris. Yeah. And anybody else, and probably the listeners that are listening to this, are obsessed with the hair industry. That's why they're listening. So I'm obsessed. And even when I go for downtime, walks, I'm thinking about stuff. So I find it very, very hard. I'd like to say I exercise. Sadly, I've been in retirement in that for far too long, but hopefully again, there's an opportunity. There are some pecs somewhere under these moobs. All right. I know it. I know there are. So I'm hoping one day we may get, but look, I'm 53, coming up to 53. I feel like I'm only just starting. Yeah. And, this isn't about me. This has never been about me. Truthfully, I've always said I'm the ringmaster. Right. That's all. I'm not the person who does the trapeze and that. I'm the ringmaster, and that's kind of how I am. So when I'm not being the ringmaster, I'm with my family. I like simple time. I like hanging out with my friends. I love football. I was a coach of a football team, youth football team. But that's now come to an end. So yeah, I'm just sort of finding my way again a little bit in what my son's now coming up to 18. So his life is in a different place. So, I'm genuinely probably as excited as I have ever been right now.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Okay. I've just got some rapid fire stuff that I want to throw at you.
Yeah. It's been the first time I've been rapid for a while, by the way. So
see, I think these would make these rapid if I wouldn't have my 2 cents to add into every one of them. But here we go. What was and this is in general in life, what was the most difficult time in your life?
Oh gosh, yeah, the time at the late 90s, early noughties, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
There was lots going on. You know, we talk about mental health as well. Yeah, I was, again, before mental health was overly talked about. And because it wasn't talked about, we didn't talk about it. And that was truly difficult.
Wow. An event or a show that you loved? You know, the one that you did
say again, sorry?
With podcast, a thing. The one that you went, I always call them the one that I never planned for this, but if I had to quit after this one, this would have been it.
Oh my goodness. Again, I'm going to go back to Noel. I think that was because it was a blockbuster right there. Just a story that I think you could turn it into a film. So that one there.
Yeah. Awesome. Things you hate the most.
Bad manners, selfishness. Yeah. Those without a shadow of a doubt really grate me. Bad service. You know, I like a thank you. I like a please. They're just simple things that really, and egos.
Yeah. Things you love the most.
Beautiful people. I like beautiful people that are honest, regular, being themselves, great company, can laugh at themselves, just positivity. They're great. They're positive. There's an energy. And kind. I mean, that's not a hard thing, is it? I'm not saying we're always got the saint above my head, but look, just be, those people I love hanging around. Yeah. And when you have belly laughter.
Oh, those are the best, especially when you can't stop and it gets to be almost like a church laugh.
I love a belly laughter. Sure.
Okay. What turns you on in the creative process?
New ideas, new finding something that maybe is happening somewhere else and it is just new. No one else is doing it. That really excites me.
And what stifles it for you?
Finding out that someone's doing it already. That stifles it for me. That would be, that actually would stifle it that'd be it.
It's the, and I just realized from the words I've got written down is about the word, it isn't here the things you hate the most about our industry, but it maybe hate's too strong a word, but what are things that turns you off or things you dislike about our industry in particular?
Back to ego. I think it's sometimes a lack of originality, but people feeling that they're original. Yeah. I think maybe there's quite a bit. Look, social, we're doing things differently, but I think we've got to be very careful what we're doing. And I find I'm getting very irritated by the lack of originality from people. I'm looking for real originality, and I don't always want comedians anymore. I've got to be honest. There's lots of comedians out there that do it really well. I'm not so sure we as hair professionals, and I think maybe mocking clients is becoming a bit too much for me as well. I'm seeing too much of this for the sake of a view and entertainment, that this seems to be becoming a trend, which is becoming more and more popular. But I don't believe it puts our industry in the right place where it should be. We should not take it to, don't take ourselves too seriously, but let's not make ourselves look how we don't want to be presented.
Yeah. What you say about others is how it reflects on you. I love that.
It is.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you're dead right there, Chris.
Person that you really admire, somebody that, and it doesn't have to be in the industry. It could be in your life in general. Could be in the industry.
Mine are normally outside the. I'll tell you who I really admire. Yeah, and again, I don't think maybe American audience, but it's a guy here in the UK called Jules Holland. Do you know Jules Holland? He's a musician. But Jules Holland, yeah, he does. Jules Holland is an incredible musician. He must be in his, I'd say he's in his 60s. Still as cool as. He's cool because he's just cool. Yeah. He's not trying to be cool, but he's just cool. Yeah. But he's cool. I love what he does with music. I think he does everything that I want to do for hairdressing, if that makes sense. That he can put on a stage what's the blues singer? What's his name with a beard? It's got a beard like you, Chris.
Stevie Ray Vaughan?
Anyway,
no.
But the
blues singer?
We'll be guessing. Yeah. I can't remember his. One of your listeners may correct us, but he'll put a blues singer on with the most cutting edge rock band that are probably just breaking through, and then you got a hip hop going on. He just has a way of bringing everything together in a really cool platform, and I really admire what he does and how he does it in live formats, and it's just because the guy has a love for what he does, and for me, I have a love for the platform, and that's why I admire him.
And what I love that you're thinking is where it took my brain was, how do you reflect that back? Like there's something that you did, but how can I reflect that and put that back on me? What do I need to do to change, to figure out what could I do to mash things up a bit? Love that.
Yes, I love that. Mash things up. I'm all about mashing stuff up. I love a mash up.
Person that you wish
I love
you
mashed
could meet,
potato
or
too,
person that you wish you could meet or interview that you haven't so far, besides me.
No, you absolutely. I do really want to interview you as well, Chris.
That was a self-inverted plug there. Somebody that you would.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Marjorie, if she's listening, she could get that set up for us. That'd be cool. Who would I like? I'd love to step a little bit outside of the industry, and there's part of me that's itching a bit on that side because, look. Oh gosh, I'm just trying to think the guy's name. He's got the #1 podcast here in the UK. CEO, Diary of the CEO, but I can't remember his name. But I think probably just what I would say is there wouldn't be any. I don't get particularly starstruck. Yeah. I can't say anybody would ever make me think, oh my gosh, this guy, this lady or this person is incredible. No, I just would like. I like the stories, and I think if there's a story, everybody has a story. Every one of your listeners has a story, and sometimes, actually, sorry, Chris, I'm waffling a bit here, but for me, actually, somebody there's part of me where I'd like to interview people into their latter years that are maybe coming towards the end of their life. Oh. Sounds really depressing, but to actually capture people's words to leave for their family, for tomorrow, that I'd really like to do, because I think there's so often there's things like you think, I wish I asked that person that question, and somebody in your family, and we never do. All these things around us. So I'd love to do that. I'd love to interview people that maybe you have something to share before they've gone. Doesn't mean to sound depressing, but more in a positive light.
Yeah, it seems I know a lot of people who are going to that side where they want to help people from that era. And I think that's endearing, because I know in other cultures, the elderly, particularly when you're getting on in your years, they're there to be taken care of, looking after, also for their wisdom. And I don't know what it's like in the UK, but I think that in America, as soon as you get older, you're deemed as worthless, and
there's a whole big topic in that as well on age. I've got big views, and actually I'm just going to answer that as well, because it made me think I want to interview my mum before that's too late, because I'm coming up to 300. She's a hairdresser. I'd like to get her story, not just for share that with the listeners, but I'd like to get that. So that's probably my mum, who's coming up to 18 years. I'm going to challenge
you. I want you to get that. When are you going to do it?
I'm on that.
When are you going to do it?
Well, you always think never to, but I mean, I've got my 300 episode coming up, and I'm already starting to think towards my 300th episode, what that could be. So it could be that. Okay, good. All right. So, like that, I just gave you a month off. Where would you go? What would you do? Can't do anything with hair. Can't do anything with do you know what I'd love to do is to Yeah, that's easy for me. I want to travel through America. I've got to be honest. I want to travel through America. Month off. I want to get down to that deep south. I want to see a little bit of real America for sure.
Well, you've got to be,
and also to North America, Canada as well. So I'd like to and actually I'd like to go and watch the World Cup in America in 4 years' time and travel through. That'd be bucket list on both levels.
Gotcha. Well, you have an open invite to stay here in Phoenix with us.
I think we'll have a great. I'll keep you to that, Chris. I think we'll have a good time hanging out.
Beers and bottles of wine that'll be quaffed. Okay, things you're terrified of.
Things I'm terrified of. Oh my goodness. Things I'm terrified of. I'm not a high octane person, so anything that is danger, that terrifies me. I like being safe. I've got to be honest. You're not going to find me climbing some high. I interviewed a guy, an amazing adventurer, and he recently at this Weller event, and he was talking about these ledges that he was doing and putting on shoes that were frozen and his feet were frozen. I'm thinking, why are you doing that sort of stuff, man? That's just, and he was living for, his edge. I'm just thinking, I don't want any of that, but I admire you. So anything that's got danger written all over it, that terrifies me.
Me too. Favorite curse word?
Favorite
curse word?
Curse word in what, swearing curse word? Is that what we're talking?
Swear word.
Oh my goodness. Well, I certainly wouldn't say it. I wouldn't want to shock the listeners because I never swear, but, it's, look, what a load of bollocks.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, we'll go with that one.
You can bleep that one out.
Yeah. Your favorite comfort food?
Oh, I love comfort food. Hey, I'm all over a half pounder. That's always good. Pack full cheese, the whole lot in there. There you go. Bingo.
Okay, something in the industry you haven't done but want to.
Start touring my podcast live.
Oh, wow. A do-over. A do-over. What, something you did in the past that you could do it over.
What do it over again? If I say that and they're listening in, I'd like to put my own new spin on open chair night.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm revealing all.
Okay, tomorrow you can't do hair, you can't do a podcast. What would you do?
Can't do a podcast, can't do hair. What would I do? Depends what I could financially do, to be quite honest.
There's no limits.
You know what I'd be thinking of? I would be thinking on my next project, Chris. I'm going to be thinking on my next project if I'm on my deathbed. I'll be thinking about, what am I going to take to the gates?
Love it. Love it. Okay. Thank you for those rapid fire ones. I like to wrap them up with a couple of questions that I always like to ask people. Is two things. Number one is there's generally somebody in our life that said something, did something, and it changed us and was influenced us in a way. Was there one of those people? Who was it, and what did they say or do?
Oh my goodness, there's no prep time. I don't know. What am I thinking here? Who am I thinking? Is there anybody? There's loads of them. There's loads of people that do stuff. There's lots of people that inspire me, and I think what they're sharing with, I wish I got that at a different part of my life, because I think it would have taken me on not a different path, because I love the pathway that I'm on, but I think I'd be a whole lot richer.
Yeah.
if I'd listened and taken those nuggets of wisdom and be excited by it. That's all it is. But look, everybody has something that will inspire me. Can I think of them off the top of my head? No, but there is, in every guest that I talk to, really inspire. You know what you're doing, Chris, and you and Chris Moody, what you guys do with your training is great. Everything. There's lots.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Last thing. Actually, I have two things. Number one, if you had a wish for our industry, you could snap your fingers and it would change in our industry immediately. What would it be?
To keep people in it more. I think to keep people in the industry would be a good thing. I think that would help. There's lots I could go. I could talk about. I think we need more pathways as well.
Yeah, love that.
I feel that there is a very limited pathway for our industry. If you don't want to be, people say, oh, you could be a session stylist, but they're very limited.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to make our industry bigger in terms of what we can go off into. So all this digital space is great because that's more pathways.
Yeah, love it. And then if there's one thing that people watching and you could just say that they should stop doing it or they need to let go of something, what would that be?
Your desire to want to be a short form video superstar.
Oh, wow.
Don't get caught up in it.
Yeah.
Don't let it rule your life because honestly, it means for very little for most.
Wow.
Just concentrate on being really good behind your chair.
Being a good person. Dom, this has been an absolute pleasure. And I am so looking forward to the time when you travel the U.S. and make your pit stop for a couple of days in Phoenix. And I promise you we'll show you around and make sure you have good food, no danger, and lots of libation. So, Dom,
what a beautiful way to finish.
Dom, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor. And I just want to say thank you so much.
No, thank you, Chris. It's been really enjoyable. Great hanging out with you.